Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, so I'll focus on Agenda Watch but I'm happy to talk about anything else like big local related, or anything related to kind of data journalism and the infrastructure around it. Um, and Today I'm going to be pretty informal. I'm just going to walk through the tool itself. So I want you all to interrupt at any point if you have any questions. And then I'll talk a little bit also about the way we're using MuckRock in the tool for various pieces. Um, so I will share my screen and we can just jump in. Um, Before I start talking too deeply about it, has anyone used Agenda Watch before, or you've heard of it, but you've never actually used it yourself? I'm curious, like a general gauge of exposure. Cool. Okay, thanks, Lisa. Um, yeah, so can't emphasize enough. Please interrupt me as I'm going through this, and we can talk about stuff. So Agenda Watch is the big local news platform that basically tries to like hoover up all of the agenda meetings, documents, and agenda packets. The ultimate goal is in the entire United States. We have kind of an ever-growing number of sites and jurisdictions, really, or jurisdictions and sites where those jurisdictions host their documents that we're pulling in. So we have a list that you can find in our coverage areas of all the places that we pull in data from. And like I said, we had about 140 something like 9 months ago. So we've been really focusing heavily on getting a bunch more jurisdictions covered. Um, and I'll make a lot of plugs as we go through this, but if there's some place that you'd like to be covered that's not covered, our mission is to serve people doing this kind of work. So please email us and let us know what you would like to be covered. And we always like to make sure we prioritize those things. So twice a day we pull in all of the data. Again, depending on how curious folks are for the nitty-gritty of that, I can talk more about the kind of back end of the tool. But in terms of like what y'all would be interfacing with is you might start with a coverage area that you're curious about. Does anyone want to pick one in particular? We're doing it live. So if there's a state that you care about, I think Indiana.
Indiana, yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. And any of these of particular interest to you?
Uh, Dang, none of them near me, but why don't we go Lafayette?
Cool. Yeah, so this is like, thank you, Kate. This is one way you can get into the data, and this is something we find pretty often with more local journalists. We'll start with kind of narrowing by geography and then going in and doing a search. Um, so let's see. One of the ones that have come up a lot, and we'll see if there's any of these in Lafayette, and if there's not, I'll broaden the search out, is going for a keyword search. So it's pretty similar to what you'd expect on other search engines, where if you want something to definitely be included, and this is the text of the document, which is being generated through MuckRock and Document Cloud. Again, I can talk more about the details of how that happens, but that's where our OCR is happening. So this is looking at the document text for the process docs. So one of the themes that have come up a lot is flock cameras. So that's the license plate readers, can controversial or not in different parts of the country. I don't think there's any in Indiana, so we'll kind of generalize that to the whole United States. So when you use the tool, you'll see something like if you've quoted it, it'll be a must include term. If it's something that is not a required term, it will show up as may include. You can also do, this is kind of our hidden menu. You could do a minus if there's things you don't want the docs to include. Um, but we haven't found that's a super common use case. So typically you'd either start with, a geography and then start looking for terms. And right now this is the primary way of using Agenda Watch. On our kind of roadmap, we have more kind of alerting and more kind of like passive consumption, as it were, of different terms or searches that someone might be curious about. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But for now, this is the primary way to use the application. So you get your results, and we use the Document Cloud document viewer. You can also make that full screen if you wanted to. We love it. Great iframe. Thanks, y'all. Only feature request would be to plug in search terms to the iframe. Uh, that would be super cool. But right now it works great for you can kind of dig further into a particular document and see where that might be coming up and kind of go from there. And this is meant to be kind of lead generation, or if you just want to see like where is this coming up the most. There's a lot of different ways to use this data, and that's another thing that we're always curious about of like what are different ways that you'd want to explore this corpus, because the way we think about it is we're pulling in all of these documents every day. And that's kind of like the core thing Agenda Watch does is we're figuring out where do all the documents live and how can we pull them down in an automated fashion. And this is just like one window into that data. But if there's other windows that wouldn't necessarily be like a user interface, maybe you're really interested in alerts or something like that, let us know and let us know like how you want that to work because that's best what you need from it. So that's kind of like the primary flow. There's other things you can do, like if you want to go past or future. Future obviously won't have minutes, that'll be primarily agendas and agenda packets. If there's particular start dates or end dates, a little caveat there is that obviously we're kind of ever increasing the places that we're getting data from. So some data will go further back than other data, just depending on the time then we started pulling it in. But everything goes back at least 2 months in terms of what is available on that jurisdiction site. And then if you're really interested in particular document types, you can also filter for that. Um, I'll show you real quick like how the authentication piece works. I know that can be a bit confusing for folks sometimes, and then I will stop talking and I'll be really curious to hear from y'all. Um, so we use the MuckRock authentication, like it was mentioned, and where if you're part of a verified organization, then you'll automatically get access to the tool. And so I'm already authenticated, but when you sign in for the first time, it will have the kind of data sharing agreement that you'll be asked to agree to. I will say that the only things we care about is your username and your verification. Um, we're not capturing any sort of information about what you're searching or anything like that. So obviously we are targeted at journalists and people that don't want to be surveilled. Um, the other thing I'll flag is that we just work with the folks at MuckRock to set up a verified organization for big local news that someone who is not part of another organization, say you're a freelance person, I know, I think Lisa, you mentioned being a free agent. So if you don't necessarily have an organization that would be logical for you to join inside of MuckRock, you can send us an email over at the Big Local News email account, and we can add you to our organization and kind of be your proxy in that sense. Jake, did I miss anything that's important on the agenda watch front? Um,
For the login, we hope to add, we actually have a pull request currently open that makes it more clear that you need to be a verified user to use Agenda Watch. So
okay,
the
perfect.
onboarding process for that will improve.
Yes, and I think I have a thread with Alan where we're talking about that because I think we're
Yep,
ready for it when that's ready.
yep.
But that's super helpful too because people are less familiar, had some questions about it. Um, Yeah, and like I said, we're really conceptualizing Agenda Watch about like we have a corpus of data, we want to make it available. This is one way it can be available. We're experimenting with some things like RSS feeds, that is Jake's bread and butter, and other ways of kind of making the data more usable in all the different forms that people care about. Um, cool. Yeah.
I
Is
have a
anyone?
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How does one contribute to the corpus that Agenda Watch? Like if it's not something that you're aware of that's already getting scraped on a daily basis, but you have something that you're scraping on your own, is it possible to add to the corpus? If so, how would we go about doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think just to be like super transparent about that's something we're trying to figure out a little bit more right now. There is an open a public repo currently that's Civic Scraper where new scrapers have been added historically, but we're working on kind of thinking about that architecture a little bit more deeply now. And obviously, like in the world of AI, it's also a lot easier for anyone to create a scraper, which is very cool and democratic, and also in a large like pipeline and orchestration system, trying to figure out the right balance there is a tricky one. So right now, I think it kind of depends on like where someone's coming from. Like if you are like, this is a place that I care about. Like that's like the first level I would say of like I'm a journalist. I care about this particular jurisdiction a lot, or this maybe it's a whole state, but that's a little less helpful. So if you have like a county or a particular board you care about, that's the most useful. That would be a good time to and if shoot us an email at big local news at Stanford, which is this one. It's all over the site and whatnot. I can also drop my email if you want to CC me directly. Very happy to talk about this stuff anytime. So that would be the first one is like, this is the thing I care about. If you care about it and you know where the agendas and documents are shared, that's like extra bonus points. If you can share that information with us, that will increase the likelihood that we can scrape it. And then the next one would be if you already have a scraper for it, that would be something too, where we'd be really interested in talking with you about how you're doing that scraping. And sometimes it might be something where we can reuse the code you are already using, or oftentimes it's you figured out like the stickiness of some sort of methodology of how this site needs to be scraped, and then we might kind of re-implement it in another way. Something interesting about like agendas and all of these minutes sites and stuff, that there's also a lot of places that use a similar platform. So it might be the case where you're curious about a particular jurisdiction and it turns out it's already on a platform that we know how to pull data from. So then in that case, it's just a matter of just we put it into the system and it will start cooking the next day. Best case scenario. Does that answer your question? That was a bit of a long answer.
Yep, absolutely. And I also flagged this because I know there are attendees in here who are frequently trying to get meetings
Heck yeah.
scraped. And yeah.
You know, another thing, if folks want to just like would this be spamming the agenda doc? I don't know. But would that be an okay place if people already have kind of in their back pocket some spots? We can also make note of anything you want to add to the this call's doc.
Yeah, I encourage that actually. Please add it to the agenda. If you have like your own collection or your own specific local agencies that you're monitoring their meetings for on your own individual basis, that would be great to just replicate and add into Agenda Watch so that work isn't duplicated.
Totally. And that's like a huge priority for our team at Big Local is figuring out how we can um, kind of enrich each other's data sets rather than pulling the same data over and over again. I won't dive into it right now, but I'll put a little pin in it if we have some time. Jake's been doing a lot of Jake, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit about thinking about how can we make unique identifiers that are more useful for sharing data across um, different uses. So for example, we don't pull anything other than agenda and meeting documents, but I know other people are doing work with like recordings, um, or whatever other kind of artifacts there are. So if there was a cool way to match those up together and kind of enrich them, that's something that we're really excited about.
Totally. I want to flag two questions in the agenda. They're both from Lisa. Does Agenda Watch pull school board meeting documents? Or might they consider doing so in the future?
Yes, definitely. So this is another thing that we're working on internally is that you'll notice and we're, as you can tell, quite transparent about these things. We're working on the data model right now so we can do more boards per jurisdiction. And that's also something that if folks are interested in, I could pass to Jake to talk a little bit more about. But like reconceptualizing, like we have a place, and right now we have like a one-to-one. So you might see like, I don't know if we have any school boards right now, but that's totally something that we could do. Um, I think we have some districts that we're pulling in some data for right now, but that definitely falls under the umbrella that we care about. You know, when we think about like civic data, we really think about anything that is Jake, what's the framing that you talk about with the government commissioned?
So on this page, you won't see school boards because this is specifically a list of geographies. Um, but the board would be the government body that fall. So these are jurisdictions. Um,
Well, it's kind of a mix right now, just for a little asterisks, but
it's
that's something we're fixing.
right, but school board is at the same level as town council, city council. That's why you're not seeing those listed out here. Um, so yes, school boards absolutely can pop right into this framework. It's just a matter of do we have a scraper for that site? Um, and and it can absolutely be added. It totally works into our data model, which I'd be happy to, talk about when we get there.
Yeah, is there a particular school board that you're curious about, Lisa?
Not in particular, since I don't actually cover school boards anymore. But this was an issue that I used to have when I was covering education, is I was covering an area with like 50 different school boards because they're just each county had one, and I had covered a large region. So I was always looking for a way to like make my life easier because going to each district's board docs page was a nightmare. So I'm happy to see that there's some of that happening here.
And I will, just to get into the weeds a little bit more, whenever we have a government jurisdiction, so like Bethel, Connecticut, um, and we build a scraper, a jurisdiction may have more than one website that we scrape. Usually in Connecticut, the school boards have their own websites that are separate from the town, and then all of the town's governing bodies have put their meeting agendas there. And the school boards usually have a little bit spiffier ed tech stuff versus civic tech stuff. And so the long story short is if we build a scraper that's for a municipality, we're probably going to get all of their agendas for their Parks and Rec department and their police commission for free. Um, and we often won't get the school board when we build that. So a separate scraper would be for that school board. So again, that's like we really want to know what you're interested in because behind the scenes, as we scale up and prioritize what we're building for, like knowing that there are potential users who would use this and they're interested in something puts a lot of weight in terms of ranking and prioritizing things. And then like if you have a demonstrated scraper that's working, and that's like another weight in your favor. So
Totally. I feel like I've seen the same trend with like police departments. They have separate web pages and they have their own separate like IT infrastructure. At least like the big police departments and smaller counties and stuff like that. They might even have their web pages also like the city's web page. But in bigger cities, certainly they have like their own IT team. They have their own website, their own platform for meeting notes and things like that.
Totally. Yeah, when we added New York City and the number of documents kind of exploded in a good way, but it is an interesting kind of volume question.
yeah, I could go on all day about the different quirks and regional like variations of how governments are broken up. Like in Connecticut and New England, we don't really have county governments, and the rest of the country's like, what? Um, and so like you have much smaller resourced government entities, and then you jump up to the state level. So, but that's kind of this growing expertise. We're trying to also accumulate all of that into this project so that you can just come and have a conversation about what you need and what you want to see in this product.
Another question is there a way to get notified when new documents are added for a particular state or place? Or is it just for now like logging in and checking every once in a while?
It's a yes and no question. I don't know, Jake, do you want to talk a little bit about the feed question? But before I say this, if this is something that I'm not sure who asked this question, I'm not looking at that doc, but if it's something that you're really interested in, definitely follow up with us on the email, and we'd love to talk to you because this is something that we're kind of redesigning and reimagining right now of like what kind of notifications do people want, and we are piloting a couple different options right now that Jake can talk about that aren't necessarily, they're not currently available broadly, but they are one way that we might be doing this.
Yeah. So just the same as like jurisdictions that you're interested in, um, is important information for us to have. Features that you're interested in is really important information for us to have because um, we want to be building this tool with a really tight feedback loop from users who are actually using it. And that said, like the more emails that this our organization gets that are like, we need feeds, that's going to help us choose our roadmap for development. Um, we um, just because of um, just because of in prioritization and scaling, we have an RSS tool that is internal right now, and I expect will be um, somehow made public to certain users, um, like the verified users. But basically, we have RSS feeds that were implemented for a specific use case where people wanted to get one feed per place. So we do have that built in and ready to go. And then there are sort of logical pathways where we could imagine feeds being useful. Like, we imagine people would want to turn like any search into a feed, and then just get that uh, periodically um, uh, updated. But so yeah, all of those things that you can think of, we would love to have input on that.
Yeah, I'm curious if whoever asked this question might want to share a little bit about what would be useful to you.
It's me. It's always me.
Beautiful, Lisa. Thank you.
The reason I had asked this question is because, again, thinking about my past experience with having like a lot of different school boards is like, instead of going, it used to be go around and see what they were doing. This brings it all into one place. And then is it like, could I wake up in the morning and have like, you have 5 school boards that have published agendas for their next meeting, and like, here's like a quick summary of each. Like, that's like a dream scenario, but it sounds like it's not that far from reality based on what y'all are working on. So I was thinking of like just dreaming on ways this could be useful to me, maybe in my next job.
Oh, well, we love the dreaming. Yeah, I love to hear that because I think that like there's so many like permutations of how this could look, right? There's like I care about every school board of the whole United States, or I care about these particular like a discrete set of like 5 school boards, or it's like I care about these keywords, but I care about them in these particular places, or I care about them in the whole country. Like there are kind of like so many different ways that we've heard this could be useful to folks, and also like going further down the kind of on the other side of like kind of these more basic features, something like would you want like a summary of the topics in the document? There's like a lot of different of what information do you want from these agendas? Oh, I see another question. How should we submit? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, so if you have them already and want to drop them in the agenda doc, um, I think I don't know what would be the
You
right
can
place to.
drop it in. You can just drop it in at the bottom of the questions.
Sweet. Yeah, that's one option if you want to drop it in there, and then if you don't mind sharing your contact information, we might want to follow up with you to get more information. But if more comes up later or you want to wait until later, you can also send an email to Big Local News, the main email, but we'll also drop our personal emails there to make sure we don't miss anything.
And if you do reach out to us and you're interested in a feature or jurisdiction, um, you know, when the time rolls around that we were to implement that, we want to implement features with real users, like ready to ready to roll. So even if it doesn't isn't, it might be an opportunity where you can be sort of a beta tester of that um, particular feature, because we don't want to build them like in the abstract. We want to build them around a specific use case. So, for example, in that case where people just wanted one feed per place, another use case might be like, I want a feed of these 10 places, or every place in a state, or just this one board. And those are all, possibilities.
I have another question for you, Lisa. I'm curious, or anyone else on the call. When you're thinking about, and I won't make this too much of like a user research interview, but I am super curious what would be most useful to you. Um, would you imagine like an email notification or a Slack notification or I don't know, a physical letter? Like what would be like the best way in your like ideal scenario to get that?
Postcards. Jake, that's funny. I am a person who would benefit from like a morning, like a once a day email. In my last newsroom, we did not use Slack, so we were working on dinosaurs. We were using Google Chat, so like I love a good Slack integration, but just it just was not. I know you're like, oh, yeah, we were riding on dinosaurs. And so, yeah, I think email is like when I open my email in the morning and it's there and I could just glance over it and see like what's important to me that day. And especially if there's that setup where it might be a keyword. Like for instance, I can imagine me setting up a search that would throw a notification anytime that there is a mention of book bans or book restrictions on a school board
Mm.
agenda. So that sort of thing would be interesting to me, along with just new documents being uploaded. And also, if you wanted to test some things out and do a full user interview page, just like let me know. I'm happy
Oh
to.
gosh, amazing.
Yeah.
Coming from like a user experience, I also agree that like the daily digest email is great. One of my favorite newsletters is a hyper obscure service called Flight Aware, which gives you like a once a day or like a once a week email that tells you about all the different weird flight news that has happened this past week. And I really like their format because it's digestible. It's like I can take these different like news about the flight industry and make my own decisions based on it.
Sweet. Yeah, that's super helpful because I think that's always something we're trying to think about because we have other tools at Big Local that send notifications and we're always trying to figure out like what Jake always says, signal to noise, right? Like how much are you feeling spammed or are you feeling helped? And I feel like it could be a pretty fine line.
Yeah, I think there's also like a configurability, right? Like speaking from, I've worked on redesigning Klaxon, which is like alerting for when web pages change.
We
And
love Klaxon.
part of that is like,
Yeah.
how often do people want to be alerted for things that are like breaking news related? They want to get alerted right away. For other kinds of things, maybe being able to configure how often I receive an email or digest, I think is good. Yeah, Google Alerts, I think, is the thing that people point to most often for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, shout out to Klaxon. When we were at Jake and I worked at the Washington Post together before this, and we had an instance of Klaxon running that was beloved in the newsroom. So thanks to you guys on that. I'm curious, Kate, when you're thinking about something like Agenda Watch, how you would see like what kind of information you'd want from it. Um, whether it's notifications or finding keywords or yeah.
I think definitely finding keywords, especially in, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of, smaller counties with not the biggest budgets in the world. Just getting something that is a user-friendly interface to search a bunch of things at the same time. And, I know the county next to us, which my editor covers, they have, I think, 4 different school boards in the one county. They've got, double the meetings at the local government level that we have at our county. So I think for somebody like him, it would just be having it all in one spot rather than a notification because we're, as hyperlocal media, we're expected to cover basically every meeting. And sometimes it's
Mm,
just not possible. And obviously recording helps with that sometimes if the mics are quality, but yeah, I think that would be less so than notifications, just um, being able to search in that way all in one place.
gotcha. Yeah, that's really helpful. And so when you say the other kind of curiosity we've had is like, are there people who want to see the agenda because it's something that might inform whether they go to a meeting?
Yes. Yeah. And I think the other thing too for that is that I mean we don't necessarily publish the agendas. We sometimes we receive them from time to time from the school board, for example, because it's a public notice. They're expected to notify us as the paper of record. But we don't often publish those necessarily. But I have seen, comments from readers and locals, not necessarily on our pages, but just in general out there about how hard it is to find those resources and to navigate through those various different websites and find the information they're looking for to decide, am I going to skip work today to go and, attend this 9 o'clock meeting? Are they going to talk about the data center, or are they just going to talk about, yes, we approved this thing that says we don't have any covered bridges,
Yeah.
which they did the other day. So,
Gotcha.
so yeah, that's what I would say our needs are. I also wanted to say the Post was my hometown paper, so yeah, heart goes out to you guys.
Thanks. Yeah, we're fortunate that we get to do the work we love to do still. But now for everybody, not just one newsroom. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think that that also kind of feeds into the question that we've had too about like Agenda Watch as like a notification platform, again, as like that idea of like the window into the data versus something that like informs future action, or something that's like about analysis, like bulk analysis of documents. So I don't know if that is something that would be interesting to you guys. We've talked about a lot of different, these are really purely like brainstorm blue sky conversations we've had. But right now it's kind of like you look at each document one by one, like we were showing in the
Yeah,
iframe, versus being able to like export them to like pinpoint or something like that that folks might use. Like, how can you imagine something like that?
for sure. I mean, at our county level, which not every county has, but there is sort of a very clunky keyword search. But it does still require that you download every single document one by one. It gives just a very short, preview of what's being said in this document. And, an ordinance might not get to a particular detail until halfway through the meeting. Same for the minutes. And so I think definitely being able to search in that macro way would be helpful. And, like also with gaps in institutional memory that happens when small newspapers are bought by different companies and have staff turnover, that would also be helpful to just be able to look far back in the past and say, well, they actually did talk about this
Mhm.
2 years ago, and this is what was decided. So
Awesome. Yeah,
For
super
a
helpful.
little insight, one of the biggest requested features on Document Cloud for a long time was to be able to do semantic searches across Document Cloud corpus. For reasons of computational cost, I don't think the entire corpus of 7 million documents will ever be a reliable feature. But I think that these kind of more hyper local corpuses of like based on like a current jurisdiction is a good use case for something like semantic search. I want to search through all these meeting agendas for conversations about banning books, for example, and I don't want to
Totally.
have to search for it by keyword search. Um, I think this is a really interesting conversation that I would like to have you all follow up with my colleague Chris Amico, who's like trying to theorize like how we want to build in semantic search into Document Cloud. And I think like restraining it to these smaller corpuses for like hyper local reporting is like really beneficial.
Definitely. Yeah, and that it's that would be real. So yes, please, we would like to talk more about this, because that is something that the original Agenda Watch had more of a not necessarily semantic search, but it did have Elasticsearch in there. And so again, it was like there's a lot of reasons why we took it out for this next version, and I've been thinking more about like the user experience of the searching and what folks need, and also figuring out the kind of scope of Agenda Watch, and how much of it do people need it to be an analysis tool versus kind of a higher level, like here are the documents and go look at them in a tool you already use for this kind of a thing. But then that also goes back to the question that we're always really curious to talk to people about, is like, do you care about the whole United States? Because, to your point, that's, oh, that's
Most
expensive.
Most
Yeah,
people don't.
exactly.
There are definitely newsrooms that do want to do that kind of analysis, but it turns out the majority of the time they have their own in-house tooling that does
Exactly.
that for them. Who I want to be supporting more is small newsrooms that don't have tech staff. And there are large coalitions of these kinds of small newsrooms that need this kind of tooling. I'm
Totally.
more interested in catering towards that
Exactly.
than
Yeah, no,
big
I
newsrooms with multi-million-dollar tech teams.
exactly. Yeah, and that's something too that I think that like on the big local side we also think about because we serve a lot of different newsrooms, obviously focusing on the local ones and kind of that's also again why we're thinking about these different delivery mechanisms like the RSS feed or bulk delivery, and there's a lot of different interests in them. And obviously the bulk one is more interesting to people who have more kind of capacity, aka funding to do and the skill sets to do kind of that batch analysis versus the more local one. So again, that's also something that we're talking to a lot of people about right now of, you know, what is the most common kind of scope that folks are curious about.
Is there already a connector between Agenda Watch and Document Cloud at all, or do you have to pull down the documents and re-upload them to Pinpoint or Document Cloud or whatever you're using?
Um, it's kind of a complicated question. So the short answer is we're mostly using Document Cloud as our kind of processing layer of things and our display. And we've done yeah, so it's kind of a mushy place to be, but I do think that like when we're talking about what would be the most useful kind of um, connector. We always talk about like ecosystem. Like if there's a tool that people already really love for exploring a bunch of documents, then we want to know about that and kind of enable it rather than we don't want to reinvent the wheel on these different pieces. Um, I don't know if that answers your question. Because I mean, I guess that then it's kind of a follow-up question for you. If like if you were gonna be want to like go from Agenda Watch to Document Cloud, like what would that look like? In again, don't limit your thinking in like your most magical world.
Yeah, it's something that I was thinking about like ways that I've used Document Cloud before to analyze like big like pieces of like school board budgets. And so like if there was like a click the ones I want in Agenda Watch and then shoot them over to, a spot in Document Cloud to then be able to do more with them would be cool. But like also like is that practical for everybody? I don't know. I was just kind of curious.
No, I think that's a really interesting idea. Oh yeah, go ahead. I saw you.
Yeah, I also thought of that. Like, there's support for metadata on Document Cloud. So even if you want to just like label documents by which jurisdiction they belong to or what particular like agency or school district, you could then click through to see all the other related documents that are uploaded on Agenda Watch's Document Cloud that are related to that. Either school district or jurisdiction or search term even. There's support for that already. I think that would be useful.
Something that might be helpful to flag, like either in an email to Paige and I, maybe, is if you're interested in sort of continuing this conversation around like features, and it's almost you like we we want to hear from the user who's like, this is awesome, I use it every day, to users who are like, well, this is like 90% of the way, but because of that 10%, I can't use it at all, or something like that. Because like I said, it's very important for us to develop around what's really going to happen, like really going to be immediately useful. And
Yeah, totally.
we kind of want to have like this sort of steering committee or something of users that is going to facilitate these conversations. And hopefully we'll have a form fairly soon that's like an intake for any kind of ideas like this, because that's a really great idea of just click, let me see this in Document Cloud.
Totally. Let me check to see if anybody else has dropped any questions.
No, it's
I
just
don't
me.
think so.
Just me.
No worries. I wanted to give you an opportunity since we do have like 15 minutes left. If you are prepared or want to talk about data talk a little bit, um, I open the floor for you guys to talk about that as well. If you're
Yeah,
not, totally no expectation, but yeah, I'm here for big local, talking about any of the kind of stuff that they're working on.
cool. Yeah, I can give like a high level description of it. I think that there's also another session Elizabeth mentioned where I
Yep.
think Gerald, who's the primary developer, who unfortunately couldn't join today, will give a more thorough demo of it. So basically, and Jake, you can tell me if I'm off at all here. DataTalk is built around FEC data and trying to make that data more explorable. So that's, you know, contributions or everything around elections. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this. Um, and trying to use natural language to interact with a structured database of that information. So asking questions like who was the biggest donor to this campaign and or who of the this particular kind of industry is donating to what campaigns, like that kind of an interface. So it's in beta right now, and there's some people testing it out. So far, it's working pretty well, and it's designed in a way to show you kind of how your query turned into a SQL query, which is then interacting with the database under the hood. Um, yeah, Jake, is there anything you would add to that? I think that's kind of my preview of it. It's an interesting tool, and I think it's a pattern that is showing up in a lot of different places, trying to make pretty complex data easier to explore. Um, I could share another project also that might be interesting to folks, which is generally big local. One of like the main goals is to take kind of complex data sets, either start at the local level where it's really interesting and try to build out a data set so it's useful nationally, or take a bunch of data sets that are all across the US and try to standardize them in a way that they can be used in similar manner and kind of localized to wherever someone's coverage area is. And an example of that that's more recent and obviously extremely topical is about deportation data. Um, so there's the Deportation Data Project out of Berkeley, and I think they have a handful of other partners. But Sarah Cohen, who works with Big Local News, who has done a lot of really awesome data reporting, put together a recipe. So all of this is just like free out on the internet, and I could drop a link in the doc to kind of explain how to work with that data and getting going through some examples of, it's very complicated data, so there's a lot of text here, but kind of orienting folks to what the data is, how you can use it, other stories that people have done based on the data, and kind of how they approach those stories. And then the idea of the reporting recipe will tell you, here's how to filter the data down to the area that you care about. Um, Thinking about arrests, thinking about detentions. Sarah explained it to Jake and I over a very long period of time. Very patient, and she's also someone who's very interested in talking to people who might be interested in using this data and kind of giving a helping hand with that, knowing that it's not the most straightforward data set. And then, what are some ways that you can approach the analysis? So this goes back to the, big local news being very focused on data reporting and trying to make that more accessible. There are a bunch of other reporting recipes, or if there's a topic that someone cares about, again, if there's something that you want to report on and you're not sure where to find the data, or you found a data set, you're worried, like, is this good data? Is this crappy data? I don't know, and want to talk to um, some of our super experienced data reporting folks. There are 3 full-time data journalists on the team currently, and we also have some interns who are really awesome. Jake also has a background in data journalism and editing and all that kind of stuff. I'm the person who comes from just the more pure tech side of things. So that's also something that Big Local News does a lot of, is kind of the one-on-one kind of coaching or collaborating or whatever folks need. Um, yeah, there's also a bunch of alerts that Big Local News has set up around contract cancellations. I could go on forever. There's a bunch of them, but there's also some other things if you're interested in getting notifications about different things that are happening. Um, a lot of it's very like governmental focused. We were watching all of the Doge cuts for a long time. That also is obviously related to contract cancellation. But again, that's something that goes into Slack feeds of, this contract was canceled in your jurisdiction. Might be something to look at and a quick summary of what's going on there. Um, yeah, any questions on that? Or Jake, is there anything else? Oh, the police scanner project is probably one we should talk about. Um, but any questions on the stuff I've said so far before I hand it to Jake? All right. The police scanner project is a really interesting one. Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, so um, we're it's still in development, but we are working with a really awesome developer um, who has built a tool for OpenVallejo that monitors police scanners and makes it easier to do that without being glued to the radio, which I have done in the past and it's a terrible assignment, but very valuable. Um, so the very high level view is that we are going to be enabling newsrooms to get alerts and transcripts um, when important things happen on their public safety scanners. Um, and we are looking for newsrooms that are like interested in being part of initial testing and rollout. That's a project where it is going to be slow to scale it up. In other words, we're not going to have 10,000 newsrooms able to use it on day one. We are going to be, for technical reasons, um, rolling it out in a way that really is cautious because we need to understand the reliability and we want it to be like very um, we don't want to we don't want to release something that's like not working to the general public. So this thing it does work. I'm really selling it very well here. um, no, but as you could imagine, just as we talked about with Agenda Watch, like there's so many different directions and features that you can go with that you need to understand which features are really important to the newsrooms you're serving. And we want to make it very, very useful to the first newsrooms that are using it and continue to grow in that way. So if you're interested, you can email me or Paige and say that you're interested, and that's pretty much all of the commitment you would need. We do have an intake form that we would then send you, and to learn a little bit more about if and how you're currently monitoring public safety scanners and what you would want out of this tool. So. Um, That'll be towards the end of the year. We're going to have an announcement very soon about that, and then towards the end of the year, um, or sooner, we'll have the first newsrooms like running it and accessing the system and getting alerts. But it's a really cool project.
Yeah, and Open Vallejo, so I mean they're all very cool and they've gotten a lot of really interesting stories off of their tool. I don't know, Jake, you want to talk about the one where
We,
their special their most impressive story is pretty cool.
yeah, I mean, the impact that it's had in Vallejo, or you can't really prove cause and effect, but like the the rates of I would say at least questionable police activity have seemed to have really gone down once the scanner tool enabled folks to get out there and watch and see what was happening when uh, violent interactions with police may be precipitating. But Paige, do you want to say more about what
Yeah,
you're?
there's just been some really interesting times where they've gotten to the scene before the police have even gotten there, and also been able to have kind of well, which obviously leads to really important kind of firsthand reporting of different incidents. And again, I think like the success of this project so far has also been, the thing that we're broken record about is that it's like a very direct collaboration to make the initial prototype with a particular newsroom where that's where the idea came from, was like from a really experienced reporter over there. And that again is something that's a very common pattern at Big Local of like something is proven out in a particular area as a really useful tool, and then we try to help folks figure out how to make it more useful to more people and kind of repeat the pattern.
That's also, I will just like hammer that point one more time because with that, it's like a tool for a single newsroom. Um, that's what Paige and I have, always been doing is a tool for like one reporter, one newsroom, one news desk, and then how does it scale? We're not like taking a whole bunch of analytics data and seeing where people click on their browsers and trying to figure out what to build. We just want to talk to people and learn what they're doing. And so don't think so like you can really have a big impact on our roadmap and priorities.
This project is very cool. I'm actually just emailing someone who I think would be interested in this police scanner project.
Amazing. Thank you.
I do want to acknowledge that we're at the top of the hour. Does anybody else have any last minute questions? Otherwise, I think we are set to wrap up. Folks can hang out after I stop the recording to ask any other questions. Yeah.
Thanks y'all for giving us so much great insight.